Hey everyone, I'm going to do a bit of a long discussion about drying wood, specifically for wood turning, but this could be used for just about any purpose, whether it's lumber, even firewood, I guess. I get asked all the time, how do you stop your turnings from cracking? Because, everything that I turn starts with green wood, so it's very full of moisture. Depending on the species and the time of year it's cut, it's anywhere from 30% to 45% moisture. And hopefully you can see this. So this is an example of just firewood. If you look at a firewood stack, you'll always see just tons of cracks everywhere. Just all over the end, they extend inward. So basically, cracks happen because as wood dries, it shrinks. So as it's shrinking, it's trying to compress the water inside, which, if you know much about hydraulics, you really can't compress water. So, the wood is shrinking, trying to compress water, and it gives and cracks. So that's what causes cracking. So, really, if you understand that, you really understand everything you need to know about how to dry something properly. But there's a lot of trial and error involved. So basically, I'm going to talk about everything from drying spindle blanks to roughouts or green to finish thickness, which is all of my own bowls are green to finish. So with spindle blanks, if they're small, like this is probably 2 1/4 inch square, anchor seal on the ends. So if you don't know what anchor seal is, anchor seal 2 specifically is the one I use. It's a water-based wax emulsion. It slows moisture from leaving the wood. So moisture leaves the end grain much faster than it does the side grain. So basically you're forcing water to leave the side grain more than the end grain. So for spindles this size, I'll use anchor seal. I generally don't have a cracking issue. They're not that thick. When you go up to something this big or bigger, you might have better luck using just wax. Waxing the ends, preventing any moisture loss from the end grain and forcing it out the sides, at least until it gets down below 20% moisture. Then you could cut off the wax, probably paint anchor seal on the end and just let it continue drying. So that said, the things that help wood dry or that speed up wood drying or slow it down, vice versa. So air movement, temperature, and humidity. So if I put a freshly turned green to finish bowl like this next to the wood fire, it's very hot, it's very dry, and there's quite a bit of air movement, it would crack in minutes. So same goes for drying just about anything, so something like this is going to be pretty forgiving. You can just dry in my basement, basically. Most everything I turn, I dry in my basement. In the summertime, the humidity level's about 45 to 50%, which is excellent. In the winter, it's drier. I just have to be a little more careful. But the basement's cooler, there's little to no air movement, and it's not, the humidity is a good place, especially in the summer months. If you want to dry wood quicker, it's higher temp, more air movement, and less humidity, basically. So that kind of covers spindles. So a couple other things with roughouts like this, which I don't know if anybody doesn't know what a roughout or a roughed out bowl blank is. A green piece of wood you've roughed out into a bowl shape. You leave it thicker than you would if you were turning grain to finish thickness. So like a good rule is 10% of the diameter. So if you have a 10-inch bowl, you'd want the walls to be about 1 inch thick. So a couple things to sort of note. You want the wall thicknesses the whole way around to be pretty even. I leave the bottoms just slightly heavy so that it allows a little bit more room for reshaping. And then I coat all of my roughouts in anchor seal inside and out. Not everybody does this. You could just do the end grain and leave the side grain open. I have better success with just coating the whole thing inside and out, and I will basically sticker and stack them one on top of another in my basement. And something this size will air dry from, like, these are about 38% moisture. They'll get down to 10 or 12 in 2 to 3 months. And I have a little DIY kiln in my basement that's basically a heating element that is on a thermostat and a fan to move the air. And it's not really a true kiln, but it's a controlled environment where I can turn the temp up to 125, and the air movement, it'll zap it from 12-15% moisture down to 6 or 7 in a couple days. Other than that, I air dry everything. So anything that I do that's grain to finish thickness is air dried only. So that pretty much covers roughouts. Now, grain to finish is a different animal. So grain to finish, just like it sounds, green piece of wood turned down to a finished thickness. And there's a few things to note. Every species is different. So some species work really, really well for grain to finish. And really the same thing goes for roughouts. So the species that dry better for grain to finish, dry better as roughouts. So cherry, walnut, butternut, what else? Soft maple, ash to some degree, all are pretty forgiving when you're drying, as long as you've cut your blank well, you didn't miss a crack that's already there. So when you're cutting your blanks, the closer you are to the pith or the center of the tree, the more stress and tension there is there, the more likely you are to get a crack. So, it's generally why I buy and work with slightly oversized logs. It gives me a little bit more leeway to stay away from that center of the tree. So anyhow, the thinner or thicker that you turn, so the thinner that you turn, the less issues you will have drying. So you have less thickness, you have less area that has moisture in to be compressed as the wood is shrinking. So less chance of cracking the thinner it is. The thicker it is, the slower you're gonna have to dry, which is harder because you can't coat a twice turned piece in anchor seal, because you're not gonna turn it again, you won't turn away that gummy stuff. So the real trick is creating an environment or using the environment you have to dry pieces successfully with grain to finish. So, and this is a big reason that I haven't shared this so much over the years, is because everybody's environment is different. Over the last 7+ years, I've learned to use the environment that I have available to me. So I know what my shop is like, I know what my basement is like year round. So the summertime, it's a little easier to dry in the basement. The wintertime, I have to be a little more careful as the humidity drops. So basically, if you live in, say, Utah or Arizona or somewhere where there's really low humidity, you're gonna have to be very, very careful how you dry grain to finish pieces. To the point where you might find yourself building some kind of an enclosure or cabinet that you can control the environment. Foam box, an old refrigerator, heck, an old cabinet, like an old kitchen cabinet, something you can shut the door, keep the air completely off, any kind of moving air away, keep it in a nice cool place. But the reality is it's going to be trial and error. You're going to lose pieces. At the beginning, you're going to probably lose a lot. So start with cheaper free wood. Turn the bowls for a while a little thinner than you might like as you're learning how to use and utilize the area that you have to work with. That said, just like with the roughouts, wall thickness for grain to finish is even more important. So you want this wall thickness even the whole way around. I cut this one because I left the bottom a little bit too thin. So by the time I flatten the bottom would be way too thin to sell. So it's a good example on what an even wall thickness looks like. Pretty much, like I said, just a little thicker at the bottom. Let's see, what else am I missing? I've got some cheat sheets here that just to make sure I didn't miss anything. So a couple other notes that might be helpful. Okay, so if you have a bowl that you have turned, it's green, and you're drying it. So different ways to slow down that process. You know, there's so many. You know, like I said, stick them in a cabinet. If you're having a lot of issues, and it's something that I only do if I'm turning a wood that's really difficult to dry, like oak. White oak is a bear to dry. So if it's summertime and I can control the humidity in my basement, it's not as big of an issue. I can turn them, you know, to a nice thickness, get them stickered and stacked up. Occasionally, depending on how the wood is drying, you can take a big garbage bag, cover that stack up, and then every day take that garbage bag off, flip it inside out. You're letting a little bit of moisture out, but it's very controlled. But it's very time consuming, and if you're not careful, you can end up with mold. So it'll be that balancing act between it's drying slow enough to not crack, or it's getting moldy. so that's an option. Other ways to do it. So you can, while you can't use something like anchor seal for the end grain, you could and can, I'll occasionally do this, take a low stick painter's tape, and you could tape up the end grain and then sticker and stack the bowls, and that way it'll force more of the moisture to come out the side grain. You don't want to leave the tape on super long. You'll end up with, and it's very species dependent, you could end up with mold. So some species will grow mold pretty quick, some barely grow mold at all. So it's like white oak will grow mold, maple will do it really bad, although red maple is probably, red maple is in the soft maple family, even though I don't know why they call it soft maple. Anything that isn't hard maple is soft maple, basically. But soft maple, like red maple, is actually almost as hard as hard maple. So, not that that's really vital. Red maple is super, super forgiving with drying. Like I could turn a bowl thicker than this, and I could pop it in my kiln and go from 38% moisture down to 7 in a couple days, and it won't generally crack as long as my wall thicknesses are right. The only catch is it'll move more as it dries. So the slower that you dry something, the less movement you're going to get. So, probably not the easiest to see. You can see that this walnut bowl is slightly ovaled. If it would have been dried really quick, you would see a more pronounced peak when you get closer to the pith. So the outside of the bowl would work down, the center would be a little high. Walnut doesn't move that much as it dries, especially if you dry it slow. But like with any wood, the faster you dry it, the more it's going to move. So if you want a bowl that gets really wonky and at a round, dry it a little quicker. How quick can you go? Well, it depends on how thick you've turned, the species, the environment you're in. Hopefully this helps everybody a little bit. If you have any questions specific to this, please put them in the comments below. If you're not already subscribe to the channel. There will be weekly videos from this point on. Most will be a little bit shorter, just nice little tips. Make sure you like the video if it helped you, and cheers everyone.